Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Breakdown with Bethany. I'm Bethany Silva, and a little bit about me is that I have a good amount of heroes. Some are women in my family, some are women from history, some are A-list celebrities, and some are women that are doing the work for the betterment of us all. And one such woman is Eve Rodsky. Eve Rodsky is the author of Fair Play. She is a best-selling author, also the star of the documentary of the same name. She's created Fair Play Card. She's also the author of a book called The Unicorn Space, or Find Your Unicorn Space, rather. And she is absolutely one of my heroes because she has given me the tools and the vernacular to navigate my life at home. I am an ambitious woman, a mother, a professional, and all of the things. And sometimes it becomes incredibly overwhelming. And Eve Rodsky has created this system to help me, help women like me, essentially just live a better life for themselves. And it was a true, true honor to get to speak to her, to get to interview her, to get to be face to face with her virtually. So I really encourage you to listen to this conversation. She and I are very aligned in that we are here for the moms. We want to help women get up and move. We want them to do something that they never thought they could, to take action right now, in spite of a system that really isn't set up to help them succeed. This is one of my favorite interviews I've ever done because Eve's work resonates so much with me. As you can see, I'm emotional, I'm excited. So please, please take a listen to this one. We are aligned and like we're here for the moms, right? Like I wrote a book kind of encouraging moms to banish guilt, blaze their trail, break the rules, all of that. And you're offering up game-changing solutions when they have too much to do,
Yes.
right? But the reality is we are still so overwhelmed, overworked, over all of the things, right? In a society that really isn't set up to help us succeed, right? And I know Fair Play is now the concept, the books, all of it is I think over 5 years old now.
Yes, yes.
But like, where are we at still from your perspective?
Well, I think that's such a great question. So where do I think we're at? Well, I'll just give a funny anecdote of having a reporter call me last week to say that she was reporting on the new trend of trad wives. And so I just was saying, well, I just think that's the biggest oxymoron because the word new and trad couldn't be more opposite from each other, right? Traditional wives, uh, religious doctrine that says women are helpers and men are the head of household, women belonging in the home, silencing women's voices. That will never end. That has been happening, same shit, different millennia. And so I think we have to instead look at our individual agency and our individual choices. And similar to what you've done, Bethany, have a platform to basically give women the permission to be unavailable from their roles and to take agency in their life. That's going to be a perennial message. It'll always resonate. But I do think that we're hitting a new cultural window, at least in my area of unpaid labor, that I think is very, very exciting. So I don't think we're going back the same way. I don't think we're going back to work 5 days a week. I don't think that this new administration in America can push us back into the home. I really think that we're going to continue to have a lot of progress for women.
And one of my friends and kind of colleagues in this space, Whitney Casares, she's a pediatrician and a mom, and she's an author as well. When I talk to her about this concept, she says we're kind of laying the groundwork now, but we're not the ones that are going to reap the benefits. Actually, it might be our granddaughters that reap the benefits. And I'm wondering if you what like this timeline really, I think you are so encouraging for women to create change right now. But if we're talking about like systemic change and like this on a like change with a big C, right? I'm wondering what your views are there.
Well, I think the funny thing about fair play. So what fair play, right? I mean, I'll just back up, Bethany, and say like I did not expect to be an expert on the gender division of labor, right? I mean, that wasn't on my third grade. What do you want to be when you grow up board? It definitely wasn't what I answered when Elizabeth Warren, who was our orientation teacher before she became a senator, asked us in law school what we wanted to do with our law degree. This was 1999, and I still have a paper that said I was going to be president of the United States and senator from New York, and not give up my passions to be a Nick City dancer. And so
I love that.
I
I
think
love
at the turn of the millennia, I think there was a really, really dangerous message that feminism was over, that women could do and be anything they wanted to be, and that there would be no societal repercussions for that. And so I do think that we came out, because you're talking about the generational work. I think we thought that generational work was done for us,
right.
and that had been done for our grandmothers to reap the benefits for our generation. But unfortunately, change doesn't work that way. And so I'd say, like, when I thought I'd be smashing all those glass ceilings, whether it be president or senator or Nick City dancer, as you know about my story, the only thing I could tell you realistically I was smashing 10 years later were peas for my
I was
toddler.
going to say your head against a wall.
Exactly. Really. Yeah. I had my head against the wall and peas for my toddler, Zach, while breastfeeding a baby Ben, barely holding on to a corporate job that told me if I wanted to breastfeed, it would have to be in a supply closet that unfortunately didn't have an outlet. And so I think what the mistake um, there were two mistakes, I believe, of the generations before us, that maybe led us to believe that our work was done. I think one was this idea that having it all was going to automatically mean doing it all. That because the generations before us had trailblazed in the workplace and still raised their kids and didn't invite men into this conversation, that we would not ever have to invite men into this conversation. That's a recipe for burnout. So I think that was mistake number one. And I think mistake number two was really um, keeping this last frontier of equity, which is our homes, this place closest to us, away from the national conversations around feminism in external spaces. When, as we know, the most dangerous type of oppression is silencing women's voices, bringing them back into the home, denying them access to birth control, forcing us to give birth, forcing us to use our time in service of unpaid labor. And I'm just looking at some of the fair play cards, from everything from managing our kids' friendships and social media, to dishes, to laundry, to in-law gifts, to holiday planning, to magical beings, which are, Tooth Fairy and Santa, all the way. I'm just to managing school breaks. What about meals? School lunches for kids, dinners every single night. So the more that we did not talk about this frontier of our homes, possibly because we didn't even want to admit that we married men that didn't value that labor, and there was shame in that. I think we missed a really big opportunity to bring people together in community with each other, Bethany. And so I do think that I'm hoping that that's the generational work we will lay down, for the next generations.
Yeah, it's overwhelming and also kind of hopeful at the same time. But
Right.
one of my favorite sort of things that you've done, right, is this Fair Play documentary, right? It was very eye-opening, and I think obviously it resonated so much that now the language that you've given us is really so commonplace. I mean, I've talked to so many women as part of my job and my passions, and they name drop you, they don't know you, but like we are name dropping you left and right. And then you mentioned, you're kind of this accidental activist, but how have you, again, to use this kind of word, like leaned in? Obviously, you've leaned into it incredibly well. You're a best-selling author. I want to talk about the unicorn space as well, but talk to me about like those first stages when you started to realize that this was really a big thing that needed to happen.
It's so frustrating when you feel that way. And I'm not comparing myself to Rosa Parks at all, but I'm going to use one of her quotes. She has a quote that basically says, when your mind is made up, like, the fear diminishes. And so I think, especially in Fair Play had been a 5-year passion project, I will call it, at the time, starting in 2011, just trying to figure out what happened to me um, in that time when I was smashing those peas for my toddler and having my partner, as you know, my famous start of fair play is my husband's text, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." But having a breakdown in the car over realizing that my husband thought I was the fulfiller of his smoothie needs. Yes, it made me an accidental activist because I was in so much pain in my own home. But from 2011 to 2015, I was finding out I had put my researcher hat on, Bethany, to find out what was happening to me. And I think there was beauty in knowing that what was happening to me, that I was shouldering 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, regardless of whether I worked outside the home. And it gets worse if you make more money. I wish I had known that statistic. And so I think my mind was made up when I put my researcher hat on that invisible work, second shift, mental load, cognitive labor, these things I never heard of. And I considered myself, a card carrying feminist. My mother took me to a march every single year for the ERA amendment. I have hundreds of buttons that I should probably frame um, that I didn't know of these terms, of the statistic. And so when your mind is made up to never let another woman again not know, then it becomes a lot easier to do your activism, because all it meant for me was similar to any politician. I have one message: women shoulder 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, regardless of whether we work outside the home. That's fundamentally unfair. It affects how we spend our time. Our time choice is hijacked. Men have a lot more leisure and choice over their time. That to me is the last frontier of feminism. And I'm going to just keep speaking about this until I die. And that to me is easy, because when you discover something that you wish you had known, I think it's a lot easier to do activism, because all it means is you're just going to be telling people what you didn't know. So I didn't have to rediscover anything. I mean, I created the fair play system to make what's invisible visible, but it all started with this idea that if I had known what I didn't know at the time, I would have had a much easier transition to motherhood and to adulthood.
Right. And one of the, I know you were listing off all the sort of the language, the
Yes,
phrases, right?
yes, yes,
And one of my favorite ones is the weaponized incompetence. And I've actually taught, I have
yes.
two boys, and that is something I am teaching them now, because it feels like I don't know, and you maybe have more science or research around this, but it feels like that was something that was just, they were born with. And I don't know
Yeah.
if it's a kid thing, if it's a male, I don't know. I don't know. So that one was really important to me, right? That one specifically. But if you're comfortable sharing, what does your household look like now? I think
Great
we
question.
saw you in the documentary, and now we're wanting to know like what's up.
It's a great question. My son Ben always says to me, when people Google you, they're Googling, is Eve Rodsky still married? So that sort of makes me laugh. Seth often talks about our division of labor to, men or friends. And when he says, he's had this evolution to be a more engaged partner, a real partner as opposed to a helper. He says, everybody else just has to have their wife write a book about them and portray them in a terrible light, and then everything will change, right? I mean, I think it's really hard. A lot of people don't write memoir, or we know that people write memoir and pseudonym because it's hard to write about things that are happening currently. It's much easier to write about them in retrospect. So I will say there was a lot of fear in the idea of telling my own story. What would the repercussions be? So what I would say 10 years later is that Seth is now doing, he still makes more money than me, but is doing a majority of the cards. Um, Probably, I think we probably have about 80 cards in play, and I'd say he's probably holding about maybe 50. And the hardest ones are supervising my kids, my teenage boys, their homework, their schoolwork, their after school activities. I feel like I've lost the plot a little bit with two teenage boys, Bethany. I love them. I
I'm
want to
right
be
behind you. I'm
for
right behind.
them,
Yeah.
but I've sort of lost the plot in sort of navigating them through really tricky popularity situations and driving. And so Seth has really stepped up there, which has been wonderful. And I will say that the one area where I think he's drawing the line is this week. I said I think I really need to like primary our congressperson and run for office, and he was like, I can't see you being in Washington D.C. Sort of half the year. So I'm sort of tabling that and moving more into the Fair Play Policy Institute, which is our policy work. So we have a lot of wonderful therapists who work individually, as you know, and also wonderful coaches who work with clients now who use the Fair Play vernacular and system. And so that's beautiful. There's a whole social media world of them online that are combating, as you said, that weaponized incompetence message. And so I feel a lot of grace into being able to move into the policy world. So whether it's paid leave, daycare, advocating for unpaid labor to be in the US GDP, really working on how time use is calculated for women. So the more wonky things, but I feel really happy being in that space.
So you are an author, you've created these wonderful books, but I think why you resonate so well with us is that you've created like an actual toolbox for us in the form of these cards. So tell us about the cards.
Yes. So the advice I found before Fair Play, sadly, were just two things. If you're so overwhelmed, just get help or make a list. So I talk about in Fair Play, I made a list. I made the Should I Do spreadsheet, which is the most comprehensive list probably to date of unpaid labor. It's 98 tabs, 2,000 items of invisible work that turned into the Fair Play cards. When I sent that list to Seth, given that that was the advice I had to make a list, I sent it to him after a year of compiling this very detailed list of what women were doing with their time that took more than 2 minutes that may be invisible to their partner. And I went all over the country for this. This is in 2011, 2012, before we had real social media. So I had to actually find people on Facebook and send this actual spreadsheet. And so what happened when I sent Seth this comprehensive spreadsheet, and I talk about this in the documentary, is that I sent him a big spreadsheet saying, can't wait to discuss. It was called the Should I Do. And Seth didn't respond even with words. He responded with like a pixelated see no evil monkey emoji, which told me that he didn't want to talk about this, or there was zero context for what my list was about. And so I got really dejected in this idea of making a list. Fair Play became a system, Bethany, that has cards as the metaphor. It's a game. It's you and your partner against the cards. And you build your life using these cards. A lot of them are things that are non-negotiable, like meals. Some things like spirituality are. But the reason why the cards are a relatively new tool were that I was afraid that people would just use them as a list. Mm-hmm. And so they came out way after the book, because now I feel secure in that even if you're going to use the cards sort of without the context of Fair Play, at least the context of Fair Play is already in the ethos. It's in the world. People know that it's a system. People know that there's more than just this card deck. But why it took so long to release it was because you can use these as a do no harm or a harm. Because if you just look at them and throw them at your partner and say, I'm holding all these cards, like, go fuck yourself, which a lot of people I legitimately should do, it doesn't help. It has to be using the cards as a tool in the context of a system of ownership, accountability, and trust. And unfortunately, that's a practice that you can't just do in one conversation.
Right. I love them. I love them so much. I mean, they've helped because I think also when we're in these moments of overwhelm, for me, I can't get the words out. I cannot express myself in any kind of coherent way, especially in a way that my husband will understand, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
let me just tell you, they're so incredible. And I also
Thank
want to
you.
talk about unicorn space because this is really exciting. Like this idea of, making time for your creativity and what you love. Certainly women, mothers especially, we've had to sacrifice that. So talk to me about the new this it's not new, right? I mean, it's not new, it's
Yeah,
newish.
newish. Yeah, newish book. Find Your Unicorn Space, and it became its own book, Bethany, because there was just too much identity loss uh, data and storytelling that we wanted to put into Fair Play that we had to take out. And then I started to feel that I wasn't honoring all the people that I had spoken with who told me that they couldn't even come to the table for fair play because they had been conditioned that there's only three roads available for women. And I call that the three Ps, that we're allowed to be parents, partners of men, and professionals. And so this idea that I would hear over and over again, and now we're in 17 countries, 33 territories, and this wasn't different anywhere. This idea that I don't believe I deserve a permission to be unavailable for my roles. And I'll just give you one example of this woman who read my book, or maybe a post I had written, but she was responding to the fact that she wanted to carve back time for her creativity. And I was, maybe on one of a Zoom or something, saying creativity is not optional. It is fundamentally the key to our mental and physical health. The antidote to burnout for women that I learned in writing this book is, sadly, it's not a cream. It's being consistently interested in our own lives. That's a harder sell, Bethany, as you know. It requires you, other cultural warriors out there, helping women do that. But when you put that forward, I had this woman, and she said to me that she's a single mother. She lives in New York. She's in a rent stabilized building where Juilliard students live. She used to play piano, and she was so proud of herself because she blocked off an hour to play piano. She got like fun sheet music, like she said, Hamilton and all these other musicals. And she goes to use her hour in the music room in her building. And she's through one of the windows out, she's watching the west side, sort of the sunset over the river. And she's noticing that it's getting really dark out. And so instead of practicing piano and sitting down, she takes the sheet music and puts it, back in her bag. And she goes to pick up her son at daycare because she realizes he really doesn't like being there when it's dark. And since the time change, dark is a lot earlier in New York. So what I realize is that this is a real phenomenon, that we're allowed to be parents, partners, professionals. But if you try to experiment with anything outside of that, either you believe you don't have a permission to be unavailable, so you don't do it, or even if you try to do that, guilt and shame often redirects your behavior to back to your roles. And I just don't want women living that way, because if we understood that creativity is not optional, that playing that piano is the essence of what makes her human and what makes her will make her a good parent, then I think we would be having a very different conversation than a hobby, which is like a nice to have, and it connotes inconsistency and when you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of reminds me, and I don't mean to do this, but why I wrote my book. Like,
Of course. Well, that's why I said I wanted to be with you, because I felt that your message was a message of urgency, and I love your message of urgency and strength, meaning like you have a real opinion of how women should be using their time.
absolutely. I mean, and I think about all the love that I give to everybody else, and I have to
Yeah.
remember, like you do, like we all do, all to give it to ourselves, give ourselves that time. I could talk to you forever, seriously, and I feel like I've been waiting for this. This is such a gift for me. So I want to say thank you. I also want to kind of look into the future a little bit. We just came off a very kind of interesting election, and some people are scared, some people are happy. And what does 2025 look like for you, your organization, your creativity? What looking ahead? What do you see?
Well, I'm luckily I still wear this resist ring that I picked up in 2016. So, look, the best year of my life was the launch of Fair Play. That was in 2019, where I felt that this personal project was something I was going to be sharing with the world. I had never, as I said earlier, expected to be an expert on the gender division of labor. This was a project that was to help me and my partner using organizational management tools. Getting to publish it was a dream. I was extremely scared. I'm a private attorney, had no socials, no, public speaking experience except for expository, like moot court and litigation and M&A negotiations. So moving into that was really, really scary for me and exciting. And I keep remembering and I keep writing 2019 was a year in the Trump administration. 2019 was a year in the Trump administration. So the point is that we can still have their best years of our lives. And almost when you have a message that is a little bit like yours or mine, considered maybe provocative for the time, then it's actually a way that you can break through. And so, what I would say to people, especially women, are that look, these are scary and tumultuous times, but what's going to center you? Most people would say, "Oh, just focus on your family." Like, no, I don't do that. I want you to focus on the one thing that you can say, "I can't believe I just did that." That's what I want for 2025 for women. I want them to take more risks. So much of the advice I'm seeing online now is just go small, focus on your family, garden. No, I want you to be subversive. And that does not mean political,
Right.
even though for me it is. But I just want women to say to themselves, what is the one thing that you're going to do this year that will make you say, I can't believe I just did that? As
Right.
opposed to, I can't believe I just did that. The doom scrolling. It's a different connotation and tone.
All right. I'm
I
gonna
want
do
you to
that.
come back and tell us, I can't believe I just did that. I wonder, and I'll ask you that, Bethany, when your book was published, when you got your first manuscript to the editor and you were going to get comments later, but it was out the door. Like, did you have an I can't believe I just did that moment?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it was so deeply personal, but also so deeply public too. Like I
Yeah.
really was hoping that the women that would read it would resonate and then take action, resonate and then take action. That is all I want. I do believe that is my life's work, is
Yeah.
to move women, mothers, to action, to for themselves, not for anyone else. So like I said, this has kind of been like a dream come true, getting to talk with you like this. I learned so much from personally from these episodes, and I know that I'm on your team forever and
Thank
always.
you. And yours too. And so I will just keep listening to you. And I will say, I can't believe I just did that moment for you, since you are already on that path, can be a leveling up. Like, what is the next thing you want to do, within your media empire, and it doesn't necessarily mean we have to keep being on the exact same
Right.
treadmill, or I'm not saying what's next. What I'm just saying is that we all have a special talent, and we can continue to level up that talent and to invest in that talent, even when it feels hard.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank
So
you.
good to
I
see
think
you.
we're just gonna put a pin in it right there. Thank you so
Great. Love
much.
it.